Welcome everyone to the workshop all about MCAT full-length exams. The reason for this workshop is because from the thousands of subscriber emails that I get, the same questions keep coming in over and over. When should I take my full lengths? How many should I take? How should I be scoring? If I'm not improving, what should I do? Just think of all the questions that you've had and sent me at one point or another in time. If I send you a quick response, I'm always torn between I have so much to say, so much that I feel will help you, but my fingers are going to hurt if I type this a million times. So why not create one video that answers all of these questions? So the outline for today's workshop is the basically putting together of all the questions that I've been getting over email, in the comments, and from my students. My goal is to give you a solid understanding of everything you need to know about MCAT full-length exams so that you can leave this video or this workshop feeling confident knowing when to test, how many tests to take, what to do before, during, and after, so that you're one step closer to your MCAT. The MCAT is one part in getting you into medical school and reaching your dream of becoming a doctor. But for a lot of people, it's the scariest part. Not because they're dumb, not because they're not good test takers, but simply because they don't know what to do. They're not well prepared. They don't have the information. And so they don't necessarily make the best decision. So my goal with this is to change that, to make sure you have everything at your fingertips, knowing exactly what to do. You know you need to take full lengths to prepare for the MCAT. But why are full lengths so important? Why bother? They're 7.5 hours long. Why would you put yourself through that torture again and again and again? Well, some of the comments coming in are to gauge where you stand. Absolutely. Understand the structure of the practice. Those are my 2 bullets. That's it. You guys answered the question for me. Absolutely. To time your endurance, show your weaknesses, practice under pressure, develop endurance, give you a feel of what the test is like. You are all absolutely correct. Now, there are questions coming in about which practice exams to use. We're going to talk about those in a little more detail later, but I just want to give you a heads up. This is not just for the full lengths, but this is for everything. I keep an updated resources page, and I want to make sure everyone has the link, so I'm going to add it to the notes. leahforsyth.com/MCAT-resources. The way I update this page is very simple. After every MCAT, I interview the students, at least a couple of students per exam. How was the exam? How did you score? On practice tests, how did you do in practice material? What did you find most helpful preparing for the exam? That's where the resources are. I rank the MCATs, the practice test companies, and I even have a discount for you on one of the top recommended ones. So that's all on MCAT resources. But why are taking full length so important? One is you're going to build the skill. It's basically a wake-up call for you. This is what the exam is all about. This is where you want to be. And hey, take the exam. This is where you are. Am I where I need to be? Can I concentrate? Can I stay awake? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? What is going on? Can I discipline myself to sit for 7.5 hours with limited breaks and focus at maximum capacity? Maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but every time you take another full length, you get a little bit better and a little bit more comfortable to the point where on test day, you've built up every little, you've built it up in increments. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. You're getting exponentially better to the point where you're ready to ace your exam on test day. But the second reason, and this is the one that I think everyone thinks of, is to measure progress. If you know you want to reach a certain score and your practice test is 20 points lower, you know you need to work on it. And then you take another exam and you're not quite 20 points lower, but you're still not there, and you're still not there, and you're still not there. You measure your progress every step of the way to see if you're getting closer. But more importantly, you learn to identify your weak areas. If you know that you have to study, but you don't know what to study, how do you know you're going to get there? I had a student email me the other day. She's testing in about 6 weeks, and she wants to know if she's ready. She spent X amount of time on content. I said, great. How did you score in the most recent full-length practice test? Well, I took the old version. That doesn't count. If you don't know where you stand right now, how do you know what you're working on? A quote I heard recently that I absolutely love. If you don't know where you're going, all the roads will get you there. So, you take an exam, you don't score where you want. That's okay. You took the exam, you worked on your endurance, you measured your progress so you see where you are compared to where you need to be. But then you start breaking down the exam and recognizing, oh, I need to work on this area and this area and this area. And every exam shows you what to work on so that the areas you need to work on become less and less and less, and your scores go up and up and up. You use these exams to identify where you are, where you need to go. Hardcore data. So you know you need to take the full lengths, but when should you be taking them? How frequently are you supposed to take your full lengths to make sure you get the absolute most out of it without burning out in the process? I'm seeing a lot of different comments from take them every week to I've been taking them every week to twice a month, once a month. Well, it depends on where you're up to. If you are just starting out, do you have any business taking an exam a week? No, you're not ready. You haven't mastered anything. And by putting yourself through the torture of that 7.5 hour exam, you are going to burn out. On the other hand, if you're about to take your MCAT, you should be taking an exam every week, once a week, the day and time of your exam. For homework, I gave you the 3 phases of MCAT prep and how to break up your study schedule. I'll have a link to the article below the video. But in the 3 phases, you have different objectives. Phase 1 is content. Phase 2 is where you're practicing, and phase 3 are your full lengths. Before phase 1, though, we want to add in a pre-phase 1. Pre-phase 1 is when you're just starting out. This is for the average student. You're either still in college, you just finished college, you're in a post-bac, you're relatively familiar with the content. Not saying that you remember it all. Chances are you've forgotten everything the day your final was over. That's okay. But I'm saying the student who's recently studied the information instead of someone who's been out of school for 10 years. Test yourself. See how you do. Get that wake-up call. This is what I do, what I call the baseline exam. When students sign up to work with me, first thing I have them do is get a baseline score. I want to see what you're up to. I want to see where you're starting so that we can work to improve. Now, if you've been out of school for a couple of years, I'll probably give you a month to re-familiarize yourself with the information. But it's not just to get a baseline score. It's also to really understand what it is that you're expecting. I can tell you all about the MCAT, and that's 7.5 hours, and it's grueling, and it's hard to concentrate, and you get tired in the middle, and you're hungry, and then you try to eat, but then you crash, and you have to, all of these things that happen, I can tell you about it. Maybe you believe me. Maybe you're scared into actually listening to what I say. But honestly, until you have sat there pulling your hair out by section 3 because you can't concentrate anymore, and you're desperate to eat, but your eyes are closing and you have too much coffee and you're jittery, unless you experience that for yourself, it's really hard to understand what it is that you're working for. To give you an example, we recently went on a trip to Italy. And we saw the pictures before. We saw, oh, these hikes are going to be really nice. There's a picture of a mountain and water, and it was pretty. So we wanted to do it. Compared to the pictures we saw, there is no other way to describe to you that feeling after climbing for 2 hours in the heat, soaking wet from sweat, trying to drink, but then, you don't want to have to go on the trail. And you get up there and you're huffing and puffing, and then you get to the top, there's a gap in the trees, and all of a sudden you look down and it's just wow. There's no other way to describe it other than experiencing for yourself and actually seeing the height and the depth and the water and the trees and just everything, just wow. That's what you need with a baseline exam. You need to understand exactly what it is that you just signed up for, because you're going to be studying for months to come. And unless you know what you're studying for, you might cheat yourself. You might not work as hard because you don't fully understand what it is that's coming. The baseline is a full-length exam. It is a 7.5-hour exam. I know a lot of companies offer a half-length diagnostic, but a 3.5-hour exam is not going to give you that same experience. It's like taking an escalator to the top. You miss out on the experience. How do you know how tired you'd be in 7.5 hours if it's only 3.5 hours? How do you know if you can concentrate for 95 minutes if the sections are shorter? And they like to make it harder so that you sign up for their programs. That's another story. I like those diagnostics as just something to take for practice on the side. But that baseline exam has to be a real exam under realistic conditions. No interruptions. You stick to the time. You don't eat or drink unless you're on break. You don't use a calculator. You don't use a cell phone. Nothing. A realistic, as if it's the real thing kind of exam. So the baseline is your first full length. Now what I have my study hall members do is take the AAMC unscored exam. The logic there is that it's most realistic exams are by the AAMC and they only have 2. The scored is closer, so save that for the end. The unscored is not scored. They just give you a % correct. And because it's easier and we don't have grade scores, let's just take that in the beginning so you get a real feel for what to expect. You're not going to get an exact score, but guess what? Are you really ready for a score during your baseline? No, you're probably going to get everything wrong anyway. So I have them take that. We estimate what the scores are, and then they don't review it. You put that exam away. 2 weeks before the real thing, I have them retake the sample test. That's when you can say, okay, when I did this the first time, I didn't know my amino acids. Now I know it. Look at that. I got another question right. When I took this for the first time, I didn't know how to calculate the charge of a polypeptide at a specific pH. But guess what? Now that I know it, I got even more questions correct. So that's the baseline. Then you start with phase 1 and you're just learning to do basics, right? You're learning the content, you're doing practice questions at the end of the chapter, but you don't want to forget what you're preparing for. The MCAT is not about content. I have you spend months on content if you can, but it's not about the content. So in phase 1, you want to take about 1 full length per month if you're taking the exam within 6 months or so. For those of you who are super motivated and you're studying a year in advance, maybe take a full length every other month. It's a constant reminder of how is my endurance? How is my content? Am I improving just by doing better in content, for example? If you don't know step 2 in glycolysis, and now you know it, you just got another question right. If you didn't know percentages in Mendelian genetics, and now you know it, you get another question right. So even without practicing strategy, you're going to see your scores go up when you're just studying content if you're studying the right way. If your score is not going up, you're doing something wrong. When you get to phase 2, this is ideally 2 months long. You want to be taking about 2 full lengths per month or 1 full length every other week. This is when you're amping up your studying. You're switching over from content which you've already completed. And at this point, you're doing practice passages and practice questions. And after the practice, you go back and review the material that you forgot, and you do more practice and more questions. This is where you're starting to buckle down on hardcore full lengths. And taking 2 a month gives you enough time in between to really, really work on your weaknesses. The more advanced you are, the less time you need to review an exam. But in phase 2, you're medium. So you need about 2 weeks between the exam review, the content, the practice, and everything else. Phase 3, you're pretty much where you need to be. You've done the content, you've done the practice, you are practically ready, and all you're doing is fortifying what you know. So this is where you take a weekly full length, and this means that you have a week to do everything that's required to bring your score up between that full length and the next. At this point, you should not only be scoring your target score, you should be scoring higher to build in those buffer points, because no matter how prepared you are, you get to exam day, you panic, you're going to lose a few points. and that's okay. That's why we build in the buffer. So which full lengths are you going to take? Well, as I said, the AAMC is the absolute best. How do we know? Well, students after each exam have said, yes, that is what prepared me the most. Why is it the best? Well, if they're the ones who wrote your MCAT, they're the ones who know what to test you on, right? So the AAMC exams, the scored is the best. The unscored, which is what they call the sample test, is the second best. And that's because it's easier and therefore not as realistic. But that's only two. I'm telling you to take a weekly full length in phase 3, 2 per month in phase 2, nearly 1 per month depending on how much time you have for phase 1. What else are you going to take? There are many, many, many exams out there. Different companies are trying to take the data from the exams, replicate it as much as they can, and give you a good practice full length. Some of them got pretty close, some of them not so much, so you have to take each of these with a grain of salt. After each exam, I interview my students and I ask them, which exams, other than the AAMC, did you find most helpful? As of right now, the ranking is something like this. Next step is on par. Exam Crackers is pretty good. Kaplan is getting better. So at this point, Kaplan's kind of jumped up. Gold standard. And TPR, the Princeton Review, is still on the bottom of that list. There are other companies with exams, Barron, Altius, I think Barclay's coming out with one. I have not heard enough feedback to rank them among these exams, but I reached out to Next Step after I started hearing that they are the second best. And I actually have an ongoing relationship with them now. I talk to them regularly. They tell me how they're improving, how they're updating. And overall, I'm very impressed. And I recommend Next Step to my students because students keep recommending it, so I keep recommending it. They have a total of 10 exams. Their prices are also the best, and there's a 10% discount on my website. So it's the best of all worlds. The most exams, a good discount, and the best exams. Exam Crackers is a little more on the expensive side. The biggest downside with their exams is they don't give you numbers. They give you percentages, similar to the AAMC, sorry, not scored, but the unscored. And honestly, if I'm getting a baseline every other week, I want to know a number. I don't want to guess where I'm up to. That's the point of taking exams, so that you don't have to guess. If the rankings change based on feedback, or if you need any other information, including the discount, it's all on the resource page on my website, leahforsci.com/mcat-resources, and you can find all that information there. We have a general plan of when and how frequently to study. But what if you just woke up today and realized, hey, I'm testing in 6 weeks and I need to take full lengths because I haven't been doing so? Should I start taking maybe 2 a week? And I get this. I have a student who emailed me with her study plan. It consisted of 1 month content, 1 month practice, and the final 4 weeks of full length every 2 to 3 days. I almost had a heart attack for her. Why am I having you wait a minimum of 1 week in between full lengths? Why is that so important? One reason is because if you're taking a weekly full length, part of it is the mental training. If you know that your exam is Saturday morning at 8 a.m., and for weeks and weeks in a row, Saturday morning at 8 a.m. you are taking an MCAT, then the day you sit down to your real MCAT, yes, you're going to be panicking a little bit, but your brain says, oh, it's just another Saturday morning 8 a.m. MCAT, and you get into the routine. But another reason, as a lot of you commented, is to avoid burnout and to give yourself enough time to review. It's not just about the exam. It's not just about the experience. If you don't learn from every full length, what the heck was the point of doing that? Why would you put yourself through 7.5 hours of a full-length exam if you're not going to learn every teeny weeny little thing about it that you can, specific to you, and improving your score? If you take an exam and you take another one 3 days later, When did you have a chance? Forget reviewing the exam. When did you have a chance to breathe in between? You're going to burn out, and by the time you get to your MCAT, you will be so burnt out, you're not going to perform your best. A comment here, I didn't review my full length, huge mistake. Absolutely, you have to review. Not only that, you want to give yourself a chance to improve. So weekly is the most frequent. And we've already hinted at you want to avoid burnout and you want to have a chance to review, but there's one more reason. And the reason is, as much as these exams try to prepare you for the real thing, the honest feedback is that this is maybe sort of kind of close. But nothing is as good at preparing you for the MCAT as the AAMC practice material. The packets and bundles have many questions that are topic specific and passage based, and students are swearing over and over that some of the questions are so close they wonder if it's even repeated. So in phase 3, in addition to weekly exams, you're going to review the AAMC passages. And in phase 2, you're going to do the AAMC passages. I would much rather see you do one full length a week, review for half a day, and then tackle nothing but content and AAMC. So it's content that you missed on the exam and the AAMC passages, because that is the best way to prepare for this MCAT. Questions. Are the AAMC passages the same as the section bank? Yes. The section bank, the packets, the bundles, whatever they want to call it, the AAMC right now provides you with a scored exam, an unscored exam, flashcards, and everything else that I didn't mention, scored, unscored, or flashcards, that is the practice questions. The packets, the bundles, and also the official guide has 120 questions, which you also want to do. Question on whether they're free. The AAMC charges a relatively moderate fee. I don't think the price is unreasonable. But if you qualify for FAP, the Fee Assistance Program, they will give you everything free, in addition to a discount on your MCAT and a couple of other things. If you think you qualify for fee assistance, look up FAP, F-A-P, and see if the AAMC will help you out. Question on how to break these up. So here's what I recommend. The final 2 exams in phase 3, the week before your exam, you take the AAMC scored. Students have reported getting anywhere within 1 to 3 points above or below their scored exam. Some students panic and they score lower. Some students are so motivated they wind up scoring higher. I had a student who was aiming, I think a 511 was his highest, and then he wound up getting a 514 because he was just so focused and in the zone. Don't expect that though. More likely is if you get a 511 on the score, you might come out with a 508, 509. Be prepared. It's also about repetition. You want to take multiple exams and score within your range to verify to yourself that you have what it takes to reach that score. So you want to give yourself a chance to verify the scores, but then the question is, okay, so you're planning it out. What exactly should you expect to see? What I have noticed is that students scoring under 490 is typically a content issue. And with intense content only, they tend to go up by as much as 1 to 5 points per exam. And I was going to say per week, but you shouldn't be taking them every week. I have seen really good jumps. If you're scoring between a 490 and a 495, at this point you're still looking at content, but it's also strategy. This is where you start looking at your timing, your approach, dissecting information, and all the things we'll discuss when reviewing the exam. In the 490 to 495 range, I typically see between 1 to 3 points per exam. When students are scoring between 495 to 500, this is where you await your breakthrough. This is where you go from, okay, I've worked on my content, I've worked really hard. How do I break that magic number, that 500? And this is where it's going to be not just content and strategy, but you really need to identify what is your personal issue? What is it that you are struggling with most? For example, if you're a slow reader, work on the newspaper strategy. 3 weeks of that, you might see a breakthrough, not only in cars, in everything. If you have trouble with graphs and experimental research, design, all of that, start using journal articles for your newspaper strategy. I'm talking about research articles. Do that for 3 weeks. You'll have your breakthrough. If your problem is you're not approaching the passages correctly, work on a strategy, practice it, and then you have your breakthrough. 500 is that magic number because 500 is the average. 500 is not enough to get you into medical school. It is the average of all the students testing. When we started this workshop, I asked how many of you took the MCAT, didn't score well, and you're preparing to take it again. For those of you who typed in a score of under 500, that's where we get the 500 because a lot of people take it unprepared. And the people who take it prepared are going to score higher, but 500 is smack dab in the middle. At this point, it's difficult. We're going to say it's still 1 to 3 points per exam, but it's harder because this is where you really have to put your heart and soul into figuring out what's going on. When you're scoring a 500 plus, it's exponential. Exponentially more difficult, or we'll just say harder to increase. And what you can expect is 1 to 2 points per exam, but do not be surprised if you repeat your scores for a couple of times while you're waiting to find that breakthrough, while you're working to get much, much better. So if you're planning to test and you know that you're 4 weeks away, but you have 5 points to increase, you're in trouble. You really need to give yourself more time, and you have to either figure out what's wrong or accept that you're going to take that exam, avoid it, and then keep practicing to bring up your score. If you're 2 months away and you have 10 points or more to increase, I don't know how realistic that is. That is something that you have to consider. Don't get me wrong, some people have done it. Some people will say, yeah, I just studied for 3 months and I aced my exam. Ask them, what was their first, second, and third score? Because a lot of times they'll say, I got a 514 after just 3 months, but their first exam they scored a 505. That's not a fair comparison. And a lot of people who do try to follow that model, well, first of all, they're the brainiacs. And if you guys are brainiacs, you don't need to be here, right? This is for the average student looking to learn and understand through strategy. What do I mean by average student? When I was in organic chemistry, I withdrew from the class the first time because I was going to fail. Why? Because I wasn't one of those brainiacs who just knew exactly what to do. I had to learn through trial and error meaning withdrawing from the class, how to learn. And then I wised up 2 years later and finally aced organic chemistry, but don't worry, I teach it now, so clearly something clicked along the way. If you took the exam or you were preparing to take the exam, you weren't ready, take a step back and ask yourself, do I want to make that same mistake? Or do I want to learn from other people's mistakes? Give myself a chance, give myself a realistic timeline, and then take the next exam. Anam is saying, that makes me happy to hear, hooray for the average hard workers. It does not take superpower brains to get into medical school. It takes hard work and dedication and a willingness to never quit. And if that means you have to study a little longer and a little harder, guess what? When you get to medical school, you'll know what it took you to get there. You'll know what it takes to work harder, and you'll be a better doctor because of it, because you worked so hard to get there. A lot of my students that do really well in the MCAT are the average students, because my students who come from the Ivy League schools with 4.0, they're so used to everything coming to them that when they struggle, sometimes they get stuck. And it takes a little more time for them to understand how to improve because they're not used to working so hard. They're not used to struggling. So you want to totally went on a tangent there. You want to give yourself the opportunity to improve without pressuring yourself by setting a goal that is not realistic so that you can get there. You can get that score that you want and then get into medical school. Right? Very simple. Get good MCAT score, get into medical school. There's a lot in between, but right now we're focusing on that aspect. So then the question comes, what happens if you're stuck? What do you do if your scores are not increasing? A lot of you are saying, yes, you've gone through this. A student emailed me before this workshop and said, I have taken a full length every week and I'm still stuck in the 490s. Guess what? That's a big flag right there. And I told the student I'll answer this on the workshop. If you're scoring under a 500, you should still be in phase 1. Under a 495, you're still in phase 1. I'm willing to bet that you did not finish content. And if you got through all of your books, that means you didn't study well enough. Because at that point, I'm suspecting there is something missing. And typically it's content and also practice and approach. So you shouldn't be taking an exam every week. If your score is not going up, you need to get out of that schedule of, I got to take a full length, I got to take another one, I got to take another one. Take a step back and ask yourself, what's wrong? What is missing? And I'm going to show you how to diagnose what's wrong. Take a step back, diagnose every area one step at a time, work to improve that area one step at a time, then take another full length to see how you've improved. And if you identify 25 different weaknesses and work on them, next exam you might have 20. The next one you might have 15. Next one you might have 15 again because apparently you didn't work that hard on them. But if you can identify clearly what's wrong, you're going to improve because you can fix it one step at a time. Now here's the thing. A student says, I'm scoring a 495 or I'm stuck at 499. What do I do? I don't know. Why are you scoring a 499? We have to diagnose the individual person because what works for you is not going to work for the next student. What works for the next student is not going to work for the next one, and so on and so on. Let's quickly sidetrack and talk about, first of all, how to review the exam. How to approach the exam. Everyone has a different strategy, but you want to have a simple strategy. Simple is always best. You know that mnemonic KISS? Keep it simple, stupid. My professor said it's keep it simple, students, whichever one you want to call it. I like this approach. Discrete questions first. Why discrete questions first? How many of you have sat down to a full length and you're so nervous? It's a practice test, but you're so nervous. You started the clock and you're just overwhelmed by all the words there. And you read the first paragraph and you realize, wow, oh my God, I'm taking the exam. What did I just read? So you read it again. What did I just read? And it takes you 3 or 4 times to mentally process what you read. But by the time you processed it, you've already lost 10 minutes, and that just causes you to panic even more. But if you start with a discrete question, it's very straightforward. In a simple Mendelian cross between a purple flower and a white flower, how many offspring? Oh, that's a short question. It's straightforward. Do the math, plug it in, you are good. If 3 minutes into the exam, you were already able to answer one question, don't you feel a little more relaxed? And then you go to the next discrete, and the next discrete, and the next. By the time you're done with discretes, the timer is still pretty good. It's on your side, and you're confident that you've gotten all those out of the way. And not just that, they're easy points. You don't want to risk running out of time and then realizing there were 5 short questions that you could have totally aced if only you had 5 more seconds to do it. For cars, there are no discretes, so obviously this only applies to the sciences. The next thing is give yourself one skip. If you're just starting out, you can have 2. In phase 1, you can have 2 skips, but you have to guess first. You are not allowed to submit an exam unless every single question is answered, whether you knew it or you guessed, because you might get free points. If there are 4 choices, there's a 25% chance you're going to get it right. And if you don't know it, 25% is better than 0, so don't leave it out. One skip is very simple. Next step, one of their exams. Passage number 1. I looked at it and I thought, what the heck? I'm not going to tell you what it is in case you haven't taken it yet. But a lot of students see that and they freak out. And they freak out and they spend 20 minutes on the passage and they just threw off their entire timeline. What if you get to that passage and you think, what the heck? Guess, skip. Then you go to the next passage and you realize, oh, this one's not so bad. And this one's not so bad. And then the timer says T-minus 2 minutes. You go back and you quickly rush through that. Or if you're just starting out, the timer runs out and guess what? You didn't get to go back. That's okay. I would rather see you spend time on the questions that you have a chance of getting right than to waste time on a passage that there's no chance you're going to get it because it's so convoluted. As you get better with your time, you'll have more time to go back. But in the beginning, skip the hard one, save time for the easy ones. Now with passages, again, this would take quite a while to discuss, so we're just going to fly through my simple approach, and then you have to practice to see if it works for you or not. The first thing you want to do is get the gist. Fast. Skim through the material. Do not focus on the hard vocabulary words. Don't focus on the mnemonics. Don't focus on reading the specific details. Who cares if the experiment happened in 1902 and the scientists had 5 long names? Unless they test you on that, you don't need it. And if they ask you a question, just go back and read it when they ask you the question. What I recommend, and this has been very, very helpful to my students, after each paragraph, stop and do a mental summary. You're going through it quickly. Give yourself a second. Close your eyes. What the heck did I just read? Okay, so this paragraph was an introduction to Mendelian genetics. I don't know why I keep going back to genetics. I think it's because I had a tutoring session on it earlier. This passage was about Mendelian genetics and an experiment they want to do to verify that these genes are not linked, for example. Okay, that was your eyes closed mental summary. The next thing you want to do is highlight a clue word. I once had a student come to a tutoring session and their passage looked like this. You know, my question to the student was, let's count how many words in this paragraph are not highlighted. This isn't a textbook that you're studying for class. This is an exam. You want to minimize the highlights so that your eyes are drawn to that. If you have just one highlight here and one here, when you scroll back, those words are going to scream out at you. So what do you want to highlight? I like clue words to remind you of the mental summary, which gives you permission to forget what you read. This was an introduction to X, highlight X. The hypothesis is that ABC, highlight the hypothesis. Just a few simple words. If you highlight the clues, you know where to come back. And this is the important part. Give yourself time to go back. Go back if the question requires. Think about it. If your exam looks like this, you have your screen open, and here's the passage, here are the questions, and they're side by side, and the question says something, and you have the choices, and you think, okay, I think I need to go back. There's a highlight, there's a highlight. A few of them are screaming out at you. So, what did it ask? Oh yeah, that's the information right there. It's side by side, you know exactly where to look, and you find the answer. You're not guessing, you're not trying to remember, you have the answer right there. As you're taking the exam, you'll start to get an idea of where the discretes are. They tend to be about the same question numbers, so jump ahead to those questions. You can, I think it's the last page where it shows you the questions, and then you can click that, or you could just go next, 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 and find them really fast. Question, can you repeat what you mean by stop mental summary? Yes. You read 3 lines. It's a connected thought. You close your eyes and you don't write it down. You just think, what did I just read? Summarize it quickly in your own words and then move on. Question, I am a highlighting fanatic. How do I break my habit? Give yourself a limit of 5 highlights per paragraph, and the highlights are not allowed to contain more than 3 words. And that will train you. Don't do it on your full lengths. Do this just in practice. Open a newspaper, start reading, and then highlighting within the newspaper, like with a physical highlighter, until you get comfortable drawing back on it. Question, should we read the question before the passage? I advise against it. I want you to have a gist of what's going on so you know where to look for the information. In order to prepare yourself for being able to do well in the MCAT, let's go back to the 3 phases. And this is something that I actually cover in that article that breaks the phases down. You want to be building up your practice. So in phase 1, you're just doing content and short questions. That's in your book at the end of the chapter. In phase 2 is where you're starting to do passages. This would be Khan Academy Online. It's free, easier than the MCAT, highly recommended. Questions in your book if you have a passage book. And then the last 2 months or so before your MCAT, you want to start on the AAMC and carry that through till the very end. Now that you have an approach, you have what to review, the real learning, we've been saving the best for last, is how to review. We said if you're stuck, you analyze what's going on. This comes up in how to review, because if you review the exam properly, you should not be stuck. Your scores should be going up. How long should it take you to review? If you take the exam on Sunday and you review on Monday, something's missing. Ideally, it should take you about a week. If you're earlier in the game, phase 1, phase 2, you want to take about 2 weeks. And that's another reason why for the baseline exam, I have my students take the unscored, because I don't want them to review it. I want them diving right into content. Why does it take a week to review? You want to go through the entire exam. If you got a question right, you may have gotten it right for the wrong reasons, or you may not have been crystal clear. So you have to review the entire exam and treat every question as if you got it wrong, and make sure you are 1000% in what happened to that question. You want to go through the exam question by question. You want to see what you missed. If it's content related, you don't want to save it for later. You want to take the time to review it. So for example, if you have a full-time study schedule, this is a schedule I just made with one of my students. Takes her exam on the weekend, then she has a day off. But to review, there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This is what her day looks like. Monday is to review the Chem Phys section. Tuesday, cars. Wednesday, biochem. Thursday, psych soc, and these are in specific time blocks. And Friday is to catch up if she needs a little more time. This is a half day. She gets the first half of the day. We worked out the specific hours. And the reason for that is she'll go through a passage, go through the questions, and then content. If she missed a passage, and she's in phase 3, so obviously she can go through it really fast. If she goes through a passage and realizes, wait, I got a circuits question wrong, she's not going to review the entire topic of circuits because she's already mastered it. She's going to pinpoint that specific area that she missed and review it. If you're in phase 2, you might take 2 days to review the Chem Phys section, 2 days to review cars, 2 days for each one, because you need more time. See what you missed, study the missed content to make sure it's not just, okay, I missed the F equals ma, what is that equation? No. Why did you miss it? What about this equation? What about this section don't you know? And make sure you review everything around it so that you never risk missing another question like it. So study the missed content, and then obviously look at all of the little things. When I help my MCAT study hall members break down their exams, our goal is to identify exactly why they scored the way they did and how to bring it up. So this is specifically what I email them. I copy and paste the same set of questions and I ask them to reply. In addition to asking them how they feel, I ask them, go through the exam, and as you review, tell me the number of questions you've missed per section due to any of these reasons. So as you're going through it, you're going through the Chem Phys section, either copy this out, put it on your tablet, or even print it, and then say, okay, I missed this question because of a careless mistake, and this question, and just go back and start counting. So say you missed 5 here, you missed 7 here, and what you're looking for is the number of questions that you missed for each of these reasons, and we're going to go through them one by one carefully. And then you take a step back. Have you ever heard the expression, what's the quote? Not seeing the forest despite the trees? It's something along those lines, not seeing the forest despite the trees. And the idea is, you're so busy looking at that tree in front of your face, you don't realize there's an entire forest there. So you're going through the exam, you realize, I missed a circuits question, I missed this one, I didn't get to finish that one. But sometimes you just need to take a step back and ask yourself, what is the major reason of why I missed questions on this exam? And by seeing a list clearly written out, and you see, wow, I missed 12 questions because of careless mistakes. Content is not my issue. It's the fact that I'm not paying attention. Then you go and figure out how to pay attention. You think you know content. You finished phase 1, but you realize, wait a minute, I missed 15 questions because of weakness with content. Did I really master content? Or did I just say chapter 1, check, chapter 2, check, without fully mastering it? This is what you need to do. You need to go through this carefully and look for the top 3 reasons why you missed questions. And these are the most common ones that come up. You might find other reasons, so just add them to the list. Let's go through them one at a time. Careless mistakes. You look at it and you say, oh, so let's see. Work net is equal to kinetic energy final minus kinetic energy initial. And you knew that, but for some reason you added them. You knew the equation. You knew what to do. You set it up right. You just made a silly mistake. If you knew a question and you're looking at it and you're thinking, wow, I knew this. I don't know why I made the mistake. Put a hash mark at careless mistakes. How do you fix careless mistakes? This is one of the trickier ones, but a lot of times it's because you're rushing. It's because you're not paying attention. And the fix is very simple. Before you tackle questions, just close your eyes and say, okay, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to read every word. How many times do you see a question that says, which of the following does not explain? And you choose an answer that explains because you missed the word not, or least, or most. Second guessing is a little bit different. Second guessing is because you're not sure between 2 choices. You have to find the reason for that. Is it because you're weak in content? Is it because of something else? So second guessing, if you were to choose the wrong one, ask yourself why. What about the question made you not recognize the answer? And that's the thing you need to work on. The next one, weakness with content. This is very easy. If you see a question, it requires an equation, you don't know the equation, you got it wrong. If you got it right because you guessed, count it as if you got it wrong. If you see a question and you have no idea what the terminology is talking about, it's weakness with content. Very simple. How do you fix weakness with content? You make a list and you go study. If it's terminology, you create flashcards, you create an audio summary. If your book doesn't have it, a lot of times, especially with PsychSoc, no single book has it all. You go on Google, you go on Khan Academy, you go on Wikipedia, whatever it takes, go and learn that information to make sure that if you missed it because of a weakness with content today, it's never again a content weakness. The next one, content known but couldn't apply. If you thought you mastered a topic, but you didn't know how to connect what you knew to the information, that's content known but couldn't apply. And then you have to ask yourself, is it because I memorized the content and therefore didn't know what to do with it? For example, I was reviewing an exam with a student, and the question was, which of the following molecules would have the highest vapor pressure? Vapor pressure has to do with boiling point, but the student memorized boiling point as having to do with the temperature going from a liquid to a gas, and when the atmospheric pressure is less than the pressure coming up from the solution itself, right? So when the molecules have more pressure to overcome the atmosphere, he memorized that. What he didn't recognize was intermolecular forces create the stronger the intermolecular forces, the greater they hold on to each other, the more temperature or energy is required to separate them, and he got it wrong. That was content that he thought he knew but couldn't apply, and as soon as he recognized that it was an intermolecular forces type question, suddenly it clicked. So this is content that you've already studied, but hint, hint, go back and restudy. This is a very common issue for students who rush through content and think they've studied it all, think they know it, but they don't test themselves. If you don't do enough practice, you don't know for sure that you know it, and then you tend to get hit with these kind of questions. So go back and study in more detail to make sure that you can actually apply it. The next one, misreading, misunderstanding, and a questionnaire, how is this is different from careless mistakes. A careless mistake is when you know you should have gotten it right, but for some reason your brain said 2 plus 2 is 5. You know 2 plus 2 is 4. You understand the question, but you just chose 5. Why? I don't know. You added instead of subtracted. You did something silly. Misunderstanding the question or passage is when you're looking at the information and you don't get it. You think they're saying one thing, but they're actually saying another. You don't want to get too technical in saying, okay, if the question says, which of the following would least, the MCAT loves this one, which of the following, if true, would least undermine the author's opinion of X? And you miss the word least. It could be a careless mistake, or it could be misreading. Classify it however you want. I don't care. I don't want you to go nuts, but you need to tell yourself, what is it that I'm missing? One of my students, this was her thing. She kept missing the little word. So I'm making her take extra time for every question. And if there's a clue word like least or most, I'm making her write it down. Just the one word to teach her to pay attention. And she's been noticing her score go up. Timing was not an issue for her. She ran too fast. By forcing her to slow down, she was paying more attention, and this was helping her. So again, figure out where you're missing your points. If this is your issue, ask yourself, how can I fix it? A common way to fix it, again, is to slow down, to force yourself to slow down. If the question asks about something in the passage and you didn't fully get it, go back and reread the relevant paragraph slowly, carefully. When you first read it, you skim, but when you read it a second time, it's because you need the answer to the question. Take your time, look for it, read it carefully. Question, how do you feel about reversing questions like that? I actually like that very much. As human beings, we are very, very critical. It is easier to spot something wrong than it is to spot something right. So if the question says which of the following is least likely, I recommend asking yourself which is most likely. If A is likely, cross it out. If B is likely, cross it out. And you've crossed out 3 answers, you're left with the right answer because it's least likely. So Michael, does that make sense? Graphs and table issues. This is another common one. A lot of students will waste so much time trying to understand the graphs and the tables, and then they have no idea what was asked. Here's the thing. If you see a graph or a table, keep it simple. For example, if you see something that looks like this with a couple of lines, don't study the graph. I don't care if it's increasing, decreasing, going up, going down, spinning on its head. Unless you're asked a question, why are you wasting time? Instead, number 1, read the figure. Read the title. So you know how they say figure 1, explanation of blah, blah, blah compared to, great. Does that make sense? Excellent. Number 2, X and Y. Make sense? That's all. So if this is a plot of time and reactivity, then I would read this and say, okay, the title of this graph says enzyme X in the study was measured on blah, blah, blah to see how reactive it is and shown. We have time, reactivity, great. Am I studying that this one's going up and this one down? No, because I don't know what the question's asking for. But if I understand that it's a comparison of enzyme reactivity over time, and there's a question, I will take the question side by side with the graph and look for the answer. That's going to make it faster. Same thing with tables. Every heading and every column, what are they asking? If the numbers, a lot of times they'll give you numbers. They'll look like this, 0.37, 0.51, and just a lot of numbers. What does it mean? Well, if I'm comparing it to a wild type, and the wild type is just the comparison, assume that these are percents. So the wild type is 100% because that's what we're comparing. And then this thing right here is simply 51%. But I'm not going to worry about it unless they ask me a question. And by saving the data interpretation until you're asked a question, you're saving time, earning more time to study the graph and table when you're actually looking at it. Do you see the difference? The next one, low on time or out of time. Timing is one of the most common issues. If you're not fast at reading, you need to work on your speed. Because if you're faster, you have more time to work on everything else. You know how I said slow down and slow down? Well, if you're out of time, you can't afford to slow down. Part of it is learning how to approach the passages strategically so that you're not wasting time. And part of it is just working on your timing. If your issue is slow reading, newspaper strategy. It takes about 3 weeks to really see it, so do it every single day. If your issue is speed, but specifically for experimental or data-based passages, get hold of a scientific journal. You could probably get free access through your school's database. I forgot what it's called, but I know that through my school's library, I was able to log in and just access all of the scientific journals, or many, many scientific journals, and just use that. It may be hard, it may be convoluted, it may be beyond what you think you need to know, but to get the experience of reading what you hate and paying attention and following research, you'll hate yourself in the first week, you'll hate yourself in the second week, by the third week, you'll still hate it, but you're going to start to feel a difference. And if you do this regularly, especially for students who English is not your first language, this is the best way to get more fluid with reading, with speed, and with interpretation of scientific data. Question, how should we read scientific journals? Pretend it's a passage on the MCAT and read it the same way, but give yourself more time. Read it a little slower, but work on your speed, work on getting through the information. Comments here, PubMed and MCBI are great for scientific articles. Yeah, PubMed is the one we had access to. Thanks for reminding me. But whatever you have access to, that's great. You can also get a journal sent to you if you need a physical thing to carry around to read on the train or in the bathroom or wherever, right? Research papers, same thing. They're hard to read, they have a lot of data, and they are perfect for building up your endurance. So the next one is forgot the equation. Very simple. You forgot the equation? Write down the equation, add it to your list of equations. You know that equation strategy that I have on my website? Practice it. Write it over and over, derive it, solve it, twist it to the point where you do not risk forgetting it again. Calculation or equation setup error, take this one with a grain of salt. The old MCAT had a lot of math. So the new MCATs, the practice ones, tend to be math heavy. The MCAT itself, don't quote me on it because your exam might be the one with the calculations, but every student I've interviewed this year so far, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, said there were limited equations. You had to set up equations, you had to do your derivations, calculations, dimensional analysis, but the math is not too crazy. So if your practice exam had ridiculous math that made no sense and takes half an hour to solve, chances are it's not going to be on your MCAT. But just in case, ask yourself, what about this math did I not know? Am I not good with trigonometry? Am I bad with doing math in my head? Am I bad with rounding? Whatever it is, work on that. Write it out 2, 3, 5 times. Find related practice problems so that you never miss it again. If there's any other reason not listed here, add it to your list. If you come up with, hey, I got this wrong for reason X, but it's not on Leia's list, add it to your list. Make your own list and make sure that you work on that. What was that issue? What specifically is your weakness? And work on it. And finally, this is my favorite one. Questions you got right for the wrong reasons. Just because you guessed it right today doesn't mean you're going to get it right on the exam. Treat it as if you got it wrong. Add it to the other list, meaning add to wherever it is on the list that you missed it, and then work on that. David adds a good one, fatigue. When you just get so burnt out, your brain wants to quit. That is something you have to work on the endurance. I have another article on the endurance strategy, how to build endurance for a 7.5-hour exam. See how far you can go mentally, and then increase week by week, 45 minutes, 47 minutes, 50 minutes, 55, 60. But don't build up to 90 or 95 minutes. Build up to 100. The MCAT has sections that are 90 or 95 minutes. But that's, if you train yourself to 95, that's your mental capacity, and then you're shot. But if you can train yourself to 100, you're passing 95 with flying colors, so work on that. If you go through your exam, you review every question, then you go through this entire list and you start working on your weaknesses, it will take you at least a week. But let me ask you a question. If timing is an issue for you, and you say, okay, I need to work on my time, I'm going to do the newspaper strategy every single day, and your next exam is in 2 weeks, maybe you're a little faster. Your next exam's 2 weeks after that, because I'm assuming you're in phase 2 right now, you're a little faster. Do you see yourself missing out on fewer and fewer questions due to time? That means your score is going to increase. If you know timing's an issue, but you're not working on it, you're going to stay stuck. If you know that your issue is content, and you study content, your score will go up. If you're not working on your content, you're going to stay stuck. If your issue is math, if your issue is equations, if your issue is graphs, whatever it is, if you're staying stuck, that tells me you didn't work on it carefully. You didn't dissect it and work on it and fix it, and that's why you're still at that same score. Does that make sense? Is that reasonable? Question, what if you're stuck on more than one? Oh, Jennifer, if you're only stuck on one, you are flying. You're awesome. The average student is going to have a laundry list of numbers and hash marks next to each and every issue. That's why you work on it bit by bit by bit. You ask yourself why you're making careless mistakes. You work on that. At the same time, you're working on content, but you're also reviewing the content you've already studied because clearly something's wrong with the application. You work on slowing down and critically reading questions and passages. You learn to do passage data more efficiently. At the same time, you're also working on reading to improve your speed. You're doing the equation strategy for 15 minutes a day. You're practicing calculations, and you're working on your endurance. And maybe one will improve and one will not. That's why you're not seeing such a drastic score increase. But if you're at a 490 and you did all of that and you can bring every section up by 1 point, your next exam's a 494. But let's say you only are able to bring your next exam up by 1 point in every other section. Now you're at a 496. That's why it takes so long and so much effort to bring your score up. But all you need is 1 point per section to jump up by 4 points on the exam. That is a drastic improvement, but it's one step at a time. So again, I'm going to drill this in again and again and again. If your scores are not going up, you're doing something wrong. That's fine. Your job is to figure out what you're doing wrong, specifically where and why and how you're missing questions. Work on improving in those areas, and your scores should go up. If your scores are not going up, ask yourself, if on the last exam I missed X amount per content, and I just missed X amount per content again, clearly I'm missing content. What am I doing wrong with my studying? I have questions again about the full lengths to take, so let's just go back to that list. I recommend the AAMC scored exam the week before your MCAT. This is closest to the real thing. This is what students say they've scored closest to on the real thing. Save that for the week before your MCAT. If your score is 5 points or more less than your target, you need to void your exam and take it again when you can bring your score up. The AAMC unscored sample test is much easier, but it's the second best. I recommend that as the very first exam as your baseline. And again, the week before the scored. If you're only hearing this 5 weeks before, then just take it once. If you have at least 3 months in between, I recommend it twice. The next best company is Next Step based on students' feedback. Some of their sections are a little bit harder. but students have felt pretty well prepared by taking Next Step full lengths. They give you scores, they have 10 different exams, and there is a 10% discount on my website. If you sign up and get the discount, I actually get a small commission. That's not why I promote them, that's not why I recommend them, but a quick thank you because obviously you're helping me as well. The next one is Exam Crackers. They're also pretty good. Their format is not as close to the real MCAT. They don't try to replicate the MCAT interface, and they don't give you numbers. And that's a big, big problem if you're trying to score yourself. Kaplan has been getting better, but the problem is that they word their questions in a tricky way that a lot of Kaplan students tend to second guess themselves when a question feels too easy. Their passages are great for practice. If you have the Kaplan books, you get access to 3 free online exams. I recommend if you're doing another company full lengths, take those exams and break them up to do 1 section a day in phase 2 just for extra practice, especially CARS in preparation for just working on your ability to think and reason and read. Gold Standard, so-so. Princeton, again, so-so. I don't think you can even get Princeton outside of their course, but if you're looking for free exams, Next Step has 1, Princeton has 1, and Kaplan gives you 3. When you buy the books, they give you access to 3 online. So this is for students on a budget trying to figure it out that way. That's something else to consider. For more questions on resources, I try to update a ranked list of what's best, second best, and so on the MCAT resource page, so make sure you check for that. So let's go to some Q&A. If I'm not scoring near my target score before the rescheduled date, should I take the AMC practice still or wait till my new date? If you're not near your target score, do not waste the AAMC. So a lot of students wonder how accurate the exams are, and the companies are guessing, but they're also comparing their student data with the scores that the students get on the real exam. So for example, Kaplan used to be 10 to 15 points off, but they've gotten better. Next Step used to be off, they've gotten better. Exam Crackers is a guessing game because we don't even know the scores, they're only percentages. If you, for example, are scoring 502, 503, and your target's a 512, that's more than just a quick margin of error, you're not ready. And I'm talking about if you're within like a few weeks of your exam. That's your clue. Do not waste any more exams. Figure out what's wrong, bring up your score. If need be, give yourself more time, and then continue the same process. Thank you, Madhu. Question, should we look for AMC exam tricks to improve on, like the way questions are worded? I find that the AMC is not very tricky, they're just hard. They're not going to give you ambiguous choices, but there are certain questions that they like. If the following were true, it would undermine A, B, C, D. They love questions like that make you think, but not because they're tricky. When you're going through the AMC packets and bundles and all those practice passages, study the style because they do like to repeat style. Question, have you also heard that Kaplan is normally harder? Yes, Kaplan is harder, but that doesn't mean the scores are higher. Abdul says, I really recommend Next Step. Yes, a lot of my students recommend it, which is why I recommend it. Question, for full-length exams, are solution given or just the answers? Chelsea, you are opening a can of worms. Yes, they do give solutions. Sometimes they explain it. Sometimes the solution is more difficult than the problem itself. Typically, the solutions will explain it, and if it's not enough, that's where you get a tutor to help you work through it. Not just what the answer is, but why you got it wrong. Question, if the unscored, how do we know how we did? With my students, I help them guesstimate, but it's really just a guessing game with the unscored because they don't give you a score. Question, have your students said the AMC section bank is around the difficulty of the actual MCAT? They've said it's a little bit more difficult, but the style is similar. So make sure if something comes up in AMC practice, you study the crap out of it because it might show up in your MCAT. Question, when I'm doing the AMC section bank, should I do them timed? Yes and no. Don't give yourself the same amount of time as an MCAT passage. I would give yourself about time and a half, if even timed at all. I would rather see you go through it slowly and work on the strategy. By the time you're doing AMC, your timing should be good. And you're really just looking at holes in your knowledge and your application and your ability to answer questions. If you want to do a time, because a lot of students do, give yourself time and a half because they're harder and longer than MCAT questions from what I've heard. Question, how close should you be to your target if you have 6 weeks? Ideally within 5 points. Content questions are not relevant to this, but email me and I will be happy to point you to appropriate resources. Question, when should you take your last full length? Exactly 1 week before the MCAT. If your MCAT is on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m., your last full length should be the Saturday morning before that at 8 a.m. Question, what do you mean by style? Every exam company has a different way of asking questions. And if you see that the AMC passages tend to go for the same type of, what do you think of this, or reasoning beyond the text on that, that's what I mean. Question, is it safe to just read the summary of journal articles? You're not looking to learn what's in the article as much as practice reading through them. The summaries are easier to read than the articles themselves. So by forcing yourself to go through the torture of the article, you're going to get so much more out of it. Does a question bank give you a score? No, they just give you the number correct, and you can estimate if I need to have 75% correct and I got 60%, what do I need to work on? And then when you review it, ask yourself, why did I get it wrong? And go through the same exact scenario. For additional practice, definitely go through whatever you can lay your hands on. With CARS, the quest for more CARS passages is one that students are always looking for. I've actually partnered recently with a company called Adapt Prep. And the reason I like them is because they have, I think they started out with the actuarial exam, which is all statistic based. So the way they rank your score and the way they present the passages has to do with a lot of statistics on the back end. And the fact that they have over 1,000 passages in their database, 12,000 passages, I forgot the number. So you pretty much never run out. There's a link on the resource page for a 3-day free trial. And the resource page was linked somewhere. Here. So go to the resource page, look for Adapt Prep 3-day free trial, and try it out. If you like it, then sign up for one of their packages. If you upgrade, I do get a small commission. But I want you to try it for 3 days first to make sure it's something you like, and then choose if you're going to sign up or not. Question, do you believe that multiple MCAT scores? It's not what I believe, it's how it reflects on you. If the medical school admissions committee sees that you've taken the MCAT 5 times, they're going to think, what the heck was this guy thinking? Why didn't they just take it once and ace it? Or if they took it once and made a mistake, why didn't they prepare the second time? I had a student come to me, she's taken the MCAT 3 times, scored about a 490 on each one, can't afford a prep course, but she's wasting hundreds of dollars taking it again and again, and every time she takes the exam, her score is going down. I mean, her chances are going down. If she would just invest the time to go through practice exams and prepare, there's so much free resources out there if you can't pay for resources, but there's no excuse to have to take the exam more than once and get the same score. You take it once, you make a mistake, you do really, really well the second time around. Why? Because if you're not scoring high enough, you have no business taking the exam again before you've brought your score up. Question. Back to your first question on not being at your target score. How do you calculate pushing your exam? That's a tricky question. If you're reasonably close, so for example, your target's a 510, you're at about a 503, you probably want to give yourself an extra month or so. This is a month before your exam. If you're far from your target, I would not worry about a test date. I would either cancel the exam or sit in void and wait till your numbers tell you that you're ready to go. A student emailed me the other day selling me on the fact that she's a diligent student. She's got a 3.8 GPA, took 18 credits last semester. I mean, this girl, oh my gosh, she clearly knows how to handle a full load. And she basically begged me to give her permission to take the MCAT without taking that many full lengths because she's going to work really hard. but her one score, the one score she took was really low. I told her it's not about you proving yourself to me or me believing you. It's data, hardcore data. You can be a great student, you can work really hard, but I will not give you the go ahead. I mean, obviously she can make her own decision, but she was looking for my advice. I will not give you the go ahead unless I see the numbers proving that you're doing well enough. So if your numbers are not going up, you need to take a step back, step out of the schedule, step out of the timeline, and figure out what's wrong. Work on your weaknesses, bring your scores up, and then create a new timeline once you know you're on track to do well. Because if you're stuck and you don't get unstuck, 1 month, 2 months, a year is not going to change it. You need to figure out what's going on before you move forward. Question. What isn't good about TBR? I'm not bringing them down or speaking against them in any way. I'm simply telling you what my students have told me, that they didn't like it. And I've also found their style to be very pretty, for lack of a better word. They're very focused on their wording, but I'm not too fond of their passages or questions. I can't really put my finger on it, but that's what I've seen. Question. How does voiding an exam affect the individual? It doesn't. If you void your exam, it counts as one of your tries. You have a maximum of 7 MCATs in your lifetime from the new exam. And if you void it, now you have 6. But the med schools will never know, so it won't count against you that way. You should never be taking the MCAT 7 times. You take it once, you make a mistake, you take it a second time, third time max. I do not want to see my students taking it more than twice. The way you void the exam is at the very end they ask you, do you want to void? And you say yes or no. What is a good score? That is opening a can of worms. You need to research the school you want to attend, what their average accepted score is, add 2 to 3 points, and that's your target score. Question, should we time our newspaper strategy or research paper reading? You want to use that as part of building up your endurance. So 45 minutes a day every morning, or if you can get up to 90 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week, if you're okay. If you're really, really slow, then maybe 4 times a week, 90 minutes, 100 minutes, you'll see a big difference. Okay, last question. If doing the AMC passages and you don't know the answer, instead of guessing, would you advise looking up the content and learning as you go? If you don't know the content at all, you're doing the passages too early. If it's just something simple that you missed, maybe skip the passage. Like, don't even go to the questions. Take a break, study it, and then go back if you know you're going to waste the questions otherwise.